I want to talk about how trauma affects your brain and how we can fix it. Okay? Trauma affects your brain in incredible ways. First of all, it changes your brain physiologically. When we do brain scans on people that have had trauma, they are the same as when people have a traumatic brain injury. It really does present that way. It changes your brain at that level. And not only that, it inhibits us. So if you think about your brainstem as this, your limbic system, your emotionality, your reptilian brain, right, is this, your mammalian brain is on top. You have this executive functioning, you have abstract language and abstract reasoning, all those are on top. This is how you learn on the top. So what trauma does is it takes this away. And now we're operating from a place of fight or flight. We're not operating from a place of attentiveness, of executive functioning, of learning. We're not operating from that place anymore at all. We can't even attend. We can't be expected to sit in a chair and learn. We can't be expected to go to work and be successful. This trauma is still preventing us from operating functionally and successfully. So what we have to do is we have to put this back on. And we can do that. We can take the charge of the trauma away. So what happens is that our brain, when trauma happens, is stuck on a loop. And what some of the programs like EMDR, some of those really integrated trauma approaches do is they allow our brains to finish the loop and then remind our brains that we are in the present. Because what's happening is our brain is stuck in the past and it's going over and over and over. And even if we're consciously not thinking those thoughts, those memories over and over, we are emotionally. It's affecting our cells. So a little bit of context here. Trauma not only affects your brain in that way, but it also affects your brain in the way that it affects the cells. So when we have a stress response, we emit cortisol. We emit all kinds of different chemicals in our brain that affects our organs. It affects our metabolism. So people with trauma gain more weight. We have a higher incidence of obesity. We have a higher incidence of heart disease, of stroke, of heart attack. It literally changes our cells and our DNA. So important to understand the effects of trauma. And what I mean by trauma, I don't mean, horrific child abuse or being a victim of domestic violence or being a refugee. Absolutely, it means that. But it can also mean things that we maybe don't recognize as, quote, trauma. So a sibling with a disability, an illness in childhood, parents are divorced, and we accumulate these different types of trauma, maybe like a codependent relationship with in your family, a family member who is an addict, emotional enmeshment with your parents, or abandonment or neglect, or even on what we call a, quote, small scale. We've all experienced trauma to some degree, and it always plays a part in our lives. And what we can do is we can integrate it, we can come back to the present, we can learn from it, and we can become better because of it. Instead of denying, avoiding, numbing, or trying to take it away altogether, we can take away the charge, we can take away the negative impact, but what we have to do is integrate that experience into our lives so that we can learn from it, okay? And we can do that at the level of the brain. We can do that when we change our perspective. We can do that when we understand what was truth and what is a perception that we had. We can do that by healing our inner children. We can do that by going back to the trauma and integrating it. We can do it in several different ways, but it is critical that we heal that part. Now, do we have to go back to the trauma and relive it? Absolutely not. I will never, ever, ever ask my clients to do that because, first of all, it's not necessarily effective. Second of all, sometimes we can get stuck in that loop. We can become addicted to the pain. But I will ask you to change your perception and your perspective. I will ask you to do small exercises with me that takes away the charge. I will ask you to de-identify with your emotions and just observe them so you can get the wisdom that is there from them so that we can heal and so that we can integrate and so that we can move on. That is what I will ask you to do. So I want you to understand that trauma affects your brain. Trauma affects your body. There are multiple levels of trauma. I don't just mean like crazy, big, huge trauma. I mean, there really is no hierarchy to trauma. I just mean difficult experiences are stored in our cells, are stored in our brain, and it presents as trauma in such a way that it affects our lives. We can heal from this. We can change our beliefs around ourselves, and we can be successful, not just relief, but enlightenment. Because relief isn't our game, it's enlightenment. Okay? All right. Thank you guys for listening. Mwah.